Hi, I'm John from Just Whisky. If you like today's show, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Consider becoming a Patreon with the link in the description below. And thanks for all the new subscribers that are trickling in. Today we are going to be reviewing and talking about and comparing Craigellachie 13 to Craigellachie 17. And we're also going to be asking the question, is it a comparable alternative to Springbank? Hence the bottles here. So, is Craigellachie 13 an alternative to Springbank 10? Is Craigellachie 17 an alternative to Springbank 18? To get a little room here, I'm going to take these away. But real quickly, this particular Springbank 10 is a 2021 release. This happens to be August 17th of 2021 bottling. Okay, so you can see the color. I cannot find out the maturation makeup of this, whether how much sherry, how much bourbon, but you can see for a 10-year-old it's quite dark compared to the Craigellachie 13-year-old. Okay, and the Springbank 18-year-old, this particular one which I previously reviewed, is a January 7th of 2020, and this particular one which I reviewed is 88% bourbon, 12% export maturation. You can see how light it is. Craigellachie 17, noticeable color difference. All right, now that we're talking about color, Craigellachie most likely adds some color. There's no mention of whether it is or not, so we have to assume that maybe there is. But in my humble opinion, if they are coloring it, it's minimal. So here's the 13-year-old and here's the 17-year-old. So the 13-year-old is noticeably lighter. The 17-year-old is a bit darker. I do not know the full maturation of these. I'm assuming they're both ex-bourbon. There's no mention of that I could find. And so, but what's interesting is Craigellachie, no mention of coloring, but they are non-chill filtered. What's interesting is the 13-year-old on the tube and the bottle, it says non-chill filtered. On the Craigellachie 17-year-old, on the tube it mentions that it's non-chill filtered, but there's no mention of it on the bottle itself. And there's a little code there. If you put your camera on it, you can get a little bit more information. And I believe they're owned by Doers. If you click on their QR code, it says suitable for vegans and vegetarians, just in case you wanted to know. So the theme of today's show is, not only are we going to review and comparing them, but are they Springbank alternatives? In my opinion, yes, they are. If you want to save a lot of time, I'm going to give a shout out to Jim, the Whiskey Novice. Quite a while back, a little ways back, he reviewed the same thing, and he came to the same conclusion that I'm going to come to, which we'll talk about. I want to focus on, so Craigellachie is a Speyside from Scotch, okay, from Scotland. Speyside from Scotland. Price-wise, okay, the Craigellachie 13-year-old you can find in my area for about $60, 55 to 60. In other areas of the country, you can maybe find it for a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But for sake of argument, for around $60 in my area, you can buy the 13-year-old. The 17-year-old in my area is closer to $180. But I did not buy this Craigellachie 17 in my area. I actually bought it from the UK. So this is a 700 milliliter bottle right here. And it's considerably cheaper in the UK. I bought 2 bottles of this, the 17-year-old, with shipping for about the same price as 1 bottle is in the United States. So in the US, the Craigellachie 17 retails close to $180. I bought these in the UK for 80 euros each, okay, plus just a little bit of shipping. The shipping wasn't bad at all. So so really, I got a 2-for-1 deal. But this review is gonna be focusing more on the availability in the United States, cost comparison wise. Is it worth buying the 17 over the Craigellachie 13-year-old in the United States? Again, United States, Craigellachie 13, about $60. Craigellachie 17, closer to $180. So 3 times the price, okay? And we're going to get into it. So I talked about the Springbank 18. So Springbank 18 now is retailing close to $285. So by comparison, this is quite a bargain. What else did I want to talk about? Oh yeah, one more thing. We're talking about Springbank alternatives here. I've previously reviewed the Gauldrons, which is a Campbelltown blend. I reviewed batch 2, and that retails for around $60 US. Batch 2, yeah, I was not overly impressed with it. Today I took another sample of it, and every time I taste it, it's a little bit different, but it does not remind me of Campbelltown at all. Today I had a little bit of that dill pickle note in it. So, in my opinion, the Gauldrons, even though it's a Campbelltown blend, does not represent, in my opinion, a Springbank. Okay, so let's start with the review comparing the 13 to the 17-year-old. Generally speaking, the 13-year-old I found took much longer to open up. So it benefits from time in the bottle, oxidation, and time in the glass. The 17-year-old, right out of the gate, pretty much gives you what you're going to expect throughout your journey of the bottle. We've already talked about price. Okay. 13-year-old. In comparison to the Craigellachie 17-year-old. The 13-year-old, as to be expected, is a little bit sharper, slightly sharper on the nose. You get that. It's not youthful at all, but comparatively, you get a little more alcohol on the nose with the 13-year-old. The 17-year-old, right out of the gate, is softer, mellower. They're both fruit forward, but on the 17-year-old, the fruitiness and the melon is, and the candied cigarettes is more accessible. Okay. On the palate, 13-year-old. A little bit more edge to it. It is a bit dirtier, meatier, not meatier as coming out of the sky, meatier, like beefy. The finish is medium, and one main distinguishing factor is that compared to Springbank has just a Springbank 10 has a very lightly peated, so you get a little hint of peat in there, but Springbank, you do get that little bit of Springbank funk, which is absent in the Craigellachie. Okay, so the Springbank funk, I've always described this as a barnyard fermented grassy hay kind of a note. That's, in my opinion, that's what I get as a Springbank funk. So there's no funk that I can pick up in either of these Craigellachie's. So that's one thing that you won't get here. I've previously reviewed the Craigellachie 13, and I compared it to the Craigellachie 14, which I really enjoy. So with the Craigellachie, you're getting a hint of that Craigellachie 14 fruitiness, that waxiness. There's a little bit of that in here, okay? Now, 17-year-old. Again, a little bit easier in the nose. The fruits, the melons are more pronounced. No nostril hair burn at all. The palate, slightly sweet. They're both slightly sweet. They're both a bit dry. The 17, the fruits are a little more pronounced. But there's been times when I've had this 13-year-old where the fruits are very pronounced too. But in today's tasting, today's environment, the fruits are more pronounced. The fruity melliness is more pronounced in the 17-year-old. The finish is about the same. The finish is medium on both of these. But the 17, I notice the finish has a slight oaky, peppery bite to it. Just a little bit more than the 13 does. Although the 13 is a little bit more rough and ready. The 17-year-old is a bit more nuanced. Okay. I don't read packaging much, but I'm going to read a little blurb from the back of the 17-year-old before I give the score. And Craigellachie, what's unique to them is they use worm tubs. Okay. And also, they say on the back of the 17-year-old, our malt is not supplied to any other distillery. It has uniquely heavily character, which we preserve by grinding it finer than anyone else does, using a very efficient Steinecker mash tun. It is also shallower and drains better than the deeper tons do, holding on to less water so that the malt's character is less diluted. So when we say that Craigellachie is a malt whiskey, we mean it. And again, they also use worm tubs, which they say a worm tub is a long copper tube sitting in a large tank of cold water, which snakes back and forth and gradually gets narrower. In 1891, many distilleries condensed their spirit this way, giving their whiskies a distinctive, meaty character. Craigellachie is one of very few still benefiting from this traditional technique. All right, we've covered everything. It's time to get down to the scoring. $60 versus $180 US. You can buy 3 Craigellachie 13s for 1 Craigellachie 17. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer. Get the Craigellachie 13. Okay? We're going to get into it a little bit. When I previously reviewed the Craigellachie 13 compared to the Craigellachie 14, I scored the Craigellachie 13 between an 88 and a 90. And in that review, I said I wouldn't replace it. Now, when I say I won't replace things, it's because I have so much that it's very rare that I have backup bottles. Lacheg 10, I have backup bottles. Why am I drawing a blank? Talisker 10, I have backup bottles. And now, in Craigellachie 14, I have backup bottles. Craigellachie 13, I have a backup bottle. And I do have a backup bottle to the 17, mainly because I bought basically a 2-for-1 special through the UK. Okay, so I stick by the score for the Craigellachie 13 between an 88 and a 90. On any given day, it can go either way, but closer to a 90. Okay. The 17, although the fruits are a little more pronounced, the nose is a little bit more accessible. On the palate, you get a little bit more instant gratification, which takes you a little bit more time. With the 13, with oxidation can get you very close to the 17-year-old. The 17-year-old, I'm going to score the same, between an 88 and a 90. Maybe a minuscule edge for the 17, but it's minuscule. And in my opinion, which was the same conclusion that Jim from the Whiskey Novice came to, which I should have just listened to him and not bought the Craigellachie 17. It's a damn fine spirit. It really is. But it's not worth 3 times the amount. And even in the UK, you're going to spend about €47 for the 13, and you're going to spend €80 for the 17. So the price difference is not as significant as here in the US. Okay, so I'm focusing this more in the US. In the UK, in my opinion, maybe it's worth €5 or €10 more, but that's up to you. But as far as US market goes, the 17-year-old, as good as it is not worth 3 times the price of the 13-year-old. All day long, I recommend the Craigellachie 13-year-old. If you want to get, a minuscule improvement, in my opinion, okay, and it's my opinion, and you have a little bit of extra money to spend, then go with the Craigellachie 17. But in my opinion, maybe the 17 scores a quarter of a point higher, maybe. But I like if you're looking for a Springbank alternative, you cannot go wrong with the Craigellachie 13, even though there might be a little bit of coloring added to it. This has got it's got the dirtiness to it, the fruitiness to it, and it's very comparable, in my opinion, to a Springbank 10. Although Springbank is unique, you're not going to get the farmy funkiness out of it, and I think Springbank is more complex as well. But if you can't buy Springbank, this is my number one suggestion for a Springbank 10 alternative. And this Craigellachie 17 leans closer to the 2020 Springbank 18 that I reviewed. Reminds me a little bit of that. So I think that just about covers it and then some. If you like today's show, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really want to get to 1,000 subscribers, so keep it coming, and then we have lots of good reviews coming up. We're going to be reviewing the Springbank local barley very, very soon, and many, many others to come. And also, there's going to be another show about, my opinion, the next Springbank alternative, which is not as close as this to Springbank, but it's widely talked about and speculated that it's probably a close second as well, or a close third, in my opinion. So like, subscribe, become a Patreon. Hats off to you all, and take care.